Millionaire Cowboy discovers unexpected love. I need a mother for my girls. You need a home. Jake Mitchell stood on the edge of his sprawling Texas ranch, the sun dipping low and casting golden rays over the dusty terrain. A self-made millionaire, he had once embraced every rugged challenge life threw at him with the confidence of a cowboy. Now that spirit felt like a ghost haunting the hard lines of his face. His heart weighed heavy under the unbearable absence of Lauren, his wife, and the fleeting laughter of their two young daughters, Lily and Grace. Each day was a performance, a show where he wore the mask of the resilient father, even as grief clawed at him from within. He could see the kids out on the swing set, their joy a bittersweet reminder of what was lost. The wind whispered through the tall grass, echoing his isolation. Scarred by the pain of losing Lauren, he was engulfed in self-doubt. How could he navigate parenthood without her? How could he fill the void left behind? The thought of bringing another woman into their lives felt treacherous, a betrayal to the memory of his love. Yet the quiet night stretched on, and the empty spaces at the dinner table only grew wider, suffocating him in their silence. At the local diner, where he often retreated for a simple breakfast, the familiar scent of bacon and coffee no longer comforted him. His eyes would wander to Emma Collins, the waitress with kind eyes that seemed to carry a burden of their own. She wore loss like a second skin, her gentle demeanor disarming as she served customers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. As he watched her interact with others, he felt a magnetic pull, the beginnings of a connection he wasn't ready to confront. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Summer days drifted by until the unthinkable happened. Jake's daughters struck up a friendship with Emma's son at the park. Their joyous laughter echoed in the air, transporting Jake back to lighter times. But a sense of dread churned in his stomach. Each giggle felt like a step toward moving on, and he didn't know if he was ready for that leap. Every glance exchanged between him and Emma felt laden with unintended meaning. Could he risk opening up, exposing his heart again? He wrestled with his thoughts, the notion of vulnerability feeling like a knife at his throat. What would the small-town community think? How would his girls cope? Just as he began drifting toward hope, the phone rang on a humid afternoon, shaking him to his core. A family emergency involving his estranged brother forced him to confront deep-rooted issues in a way he hadn't anticipated. The very foundation of his new life felt as though it was crumbling, and just as he glimpsed the potential of a second chance with Emma, it slipped further out of reach. Jake stood at a precipice, anxiety coiling in his chest. Could he truly let go of what had anchored him for so long? The whirlwind ahead promised chaos he wasn't sure he could endure. Uncertainty gnawed at him, drawing him into a darker reality. As he stared out at the fading sun, one question echoed through his mind, louder than the rest. Was he brave enough to seize this unexpected bond? Jake's heart raced as he gripped the phone. The echo of his brother's voice, tense with anger and hurt, still clear in his mind. After years of silence, the cracks in their relationship resurfaced, exposing wounds he thought had healed. His brother's struggle with addiction had set the stage for their estrangement, but hearing him now, full of desperation, reignited old guilt within Jake. He had distanced himself for his own recovery, But what had he sacrificed to protect his fragile peace? The days following that call blurred into a kaleidoscope of anxious anticipation. He spent sleepless nights wrestling with the weight of responsibility, torn between familial loyalty and the safe, fractured world he had built since Lauren's death. His daughters, unaware of the storm brewing within their father, wandered the ranch, unaware of the cracks forming in their rosy picture of their idyllic lives. They played for hours, their laughter a sharp contrast to Jake's turmoil, amplifying his internal conflict. He confided in the only person he trusted, the motherly figure of his late wife, who regularly called to check in. As he conveyed his fears about confronting his brother, her voice was a balm to his fraying nerves. "You can't choose your family, Jake, but you can choose how you respond," she said gently, the wisdom in her tone a reminder that growth often stemmed from facing one's demons. The thought of mending broken bonds felt monumental, a daunting uphill climb. Could he truly take that first step back into chaos? The next morning he wrestled with a decision. The best course seemed clear: visit his brother in person. But the thought of facing the shadows of his past filled him with despair. How could he extend the olive branch after all the years of hurt? As he pulled on his worn boots, the weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. He owed it to himself, to his daughters, and to his brother, to at least try. Emerging into the Texas sunlight, Jake felt the warm rays peel back layers of doubt. He breathed in the crisp air, a stark reminder of how alive he still was. There was a strength within him that had been lying dormant, buried under layers of grief. Just as he was about to climb into his truck, he spotted Emma across the yard, her son sitting on the swing beside his daughters. A pang of something, hope perhaps, twisted in his chest. Emma's gaze met his, and a flicker of understanding passed between them. She offered a smile that curled his stomach in pleasant knots before he turned away, the pull of their connection deepening. Could he really introduce that sense of vulnerability when everything felt so precarious? But as he drove away, he could feel the weight of her unspoken support lingering in the air. He couldn't deny that something about her brought both comfort and trepidation, a reminder of what potential lay just beyond his current struggles. The drive to his brother's town was long and fraught with memories, the landscape shifting from his cherished ranch to the roads of his past. Every mile seemed to echo doubts louder, rattling through his mind like a relentless chorus. Was he prepared for the confrontation ahead? Would old resentments resurface like the beasts they once were? As he approached the small motel where his brother had been staying, shadows of doubt loomed larger than ever. Jake stepped into the cool air of the lobby, his heart pounding steadily against his ribcage. This was more than an errand, it was a reckoning. He was about to open a door he had locked tight for years. And yet, as he turned to the hallway that led to his brother's room, a new question flickered to life in his mind. Would this encounter be a turning point or another dead end? With a deep breath, he moved forward, uncertainty intertwining with the fleeting promise of redemption, when the door creaked open and he was met again with the haunting face of his past. Jake hesitated at the threshold, the familiar scent of stale cigarettes and unwashed linens wrapping around him like a fog. It was a space steeped in memories he had tried to forget. The door swung wider, revealing Riley, his brother, sitting on the edge of a bed unmade and cluttered with empty beer cans. The sight of him, thin, unkempt, eyes sunken, hit Jake harder than he anticipated. His heart thudded, caught between anger and compassion. This meeting was a crucible, a chance to confront the past and forge a potential future. Jake stepped inside, keeping his posture steady, unwilling to let apprehension seep into his voice. "Riley," he started, the name feeling foreign on his tongue after so many years. "We need to talk." There was a tension in the air, thick and electrifying. Riley looked up, his expression a clashing mix of surprise and defiance. "What do you want? You think you're here to save me? Is that it?" His voice filled the room, bristling with bitterness. "No," Jake replied, maintaining his calm as he grappled with the flood of memories. The holidays missed, the brotherly bond frayed by addiction. "I came because I care, whether you believe it or not. You sounded desperate." "Desperate's right," Riley spat. "But you don't get to play the savior after you ghosted me. You made your choice." Each accusation struck like hot daggers. Jake felt a hot wave of shame wash over him, mixed with his lingering resentment. "I distanced myself to protect my daughters, Riley. I needed to heal. You know that." Riley's laughter was bitter, echoing in the small room. "Healing? By abandoning your blood? You were my only family, and you left me to drown in this hell." The venom in his words twisted Jake's stomach. He knew there was truth in them, but he also understood that it wasn't just about him anymore. "Let's stop pointing fingers," Jake said, his voice steadied by a newfound determination. He had once feared this confrontation, but the clarity of purpose surged through him like a lifeline. "I'm here now. Let's try to figure this out together." There was a charged silence as Riley's gaze shifted, the vulnerability beneath the bravado breaking through. The flicker of his brother's old self tugged at Jake, memories of laughter replacing those of shame. "What do you want from me?" Riley mumbled, looking vulnerable and small. "I want to understand. I want to know if there's a chance for you to get better. I want to help," Jake replied, his voice softening. Perhaps the seeds of reconciliation could take root despite years of neglect. He couldn't erase the past, but he could choose to alter the future. Riley shifted, arms crossing defensively. "Help? You don't know what I'm dealing with. I want nothing from you, from anyone." The walls he had built around himself were towering, yet Jake perceived the slightest crack in the facade and pushed forward gently. "You're right, I can't know everything, but I can offer support if you're willing to take that step. You don't have to fight this alone." For a brief, fleeting moment, Jake saw the corners of Riley's mouth twitch. Was it a flicker of hope or merely a reflex? The battle of wills lay before them, an ancient strife tethered by shared blood. Jake's determination grew. This confrontation could redefine them, if only Riley would lean into it. Time ticked slowly as they stood in the truths of their past. The silence became palpable, pregnant with potential. Suddenly, Riley's phone buzzed, shattering the intensity. For an instant, he looked at the screen as if it were poison, but instead, he looked back at Jake, turmoil etched into his features. I don't know how to do this," he admitted. Jake took a step closer, his resolve firm. "Neither do I, but we can figure it out together." In that moment, Jake realized the depth of his personal growth. He had transformed from a brother who fled from chaos to one that stood ready to face it. There was strength in vulnerability, and as he navigated this harrowing path, he understood that healing often began with acceptance. But just as Jake thought progress might unfurl between them, Riley's phone buzzed again, and a name flickered on the screen, one he recognized. The realization hit like a train crashing into him. No, not him. Jake's heart raced as he turned to Riley, the stakes suddenly higher than ever, with echoes of old fears resurrecting as a familiar face approached. Riley's gaze dropped to his phone, the animation of his brow tightening as if to shield his expression from an uninvited leech. Jake's mind raced, connecting dots that had lingered in the shadows of his thoughts. "Who is it?" he pressed, urgency warping his calm demeanor. Riley hesitated, almost indecisively. "It's Greg," he muttered, each syllable drawn out like an accusation rather than a name. Greg was the shadowy figure Jake had hoped not to hear about, the enabler who had been in and out of their lives like a ghost, always feeding Riley's addiction instead of stoking any fires of recovery. He's been trying to get me to meet him." The air crackled with tension. Jake shifted on his feet, unwilling to retreat. "You seriously consider meeting him after everything he's done?" Anger rose in his chest, hot and stifling. He couldn't help but recall the nights Greg had dragged Riley deeper into despair, turning days into a blur of pills and misunderstandings. Riley's shoulders hunched, the familiar defensive posture re-emerging. "You don't understand," he shot back, a crack in the veneer of his bravado. "I need the money. He promised he'd help. I can't even buy groceries at this point." A mental tug-of-war ensued within Jake. The righteous anger drove him to protect his brother from a cycle of more exploitation. Yet the empathy unearthed fragments of their shared past, a time when Riley had only wanted acceptance, not judgment. "Riley, if you go down that path, it won't end well. You know how Greg operates." A beat passed, the weight of Jake's words hanging heavily in the air like the thick smell of nicotine. Riley's eyes, glimmering with defiance yet battered by weariness, met Jake's pleading gaze. "You don't get it, Jake. I'm desperate. I can't keep pretending I'm okay when I'm not." The honesty coursing through Eric's voice forced a crack in Jake's heart. He stepped closer, letting a tone of gravity seep into his next words. "Desperation isn't a reason to throw yourself back into the fire. We can find other ways. You have to start trusting that you're worth something." Riley flinched at the truth that vibrated in that moment, and Jake saw it, the flicker of recognition that spoke volumes louder than any argument. The bridge between them was still holding, even when the foundation was eroded. "Let's just break this cycle," Jake pressed, harnessing a newfound resolve to reshape their dynamic. "Meet me for coffee instead, and we'll talk it through. This isn't a crossroads, it's a path. You can choose to venture forth differently. You're not alone anymore." Riley's defenses began to lower, a slow realization dawning on him. Hesitantly lowering his phone, he released a shaky breath. "I don't know, Jake. It's not that simple." "No, it's not," Jake acknowledged, the truth crystallizing in his throat. "But I'll walk with you step by step. There are lights on this path you haven't even noticed." For the first time since walking through that door, Jake saw a fight ignite in Riley's eyes, underscored by something raw: hope. Suddenly, a dark realization interrupted the moment, bringing with it a weighty silence. What if Greg didn't take no for an answer? They were not just entangled in family dynamics anymore. There was also a menacing external threat on the horizon, lurking closer with every minute. Just then, the phone buzzed in Riley's hand, demanding attention with a gritty persistence. A voice in Jake urged caution. "If he's persistent, we tackle it together," he said. The finality in his tone re-established his commitment. But as Riley's thumb hovered over the screen, Jake processed the reality that the past was creeping back more aggressively than he had anticipated. Would Riley's hesitance unravel the progress they might have found? Or could Jake's steel determination shield them from the impending storm? The buzzing grew insistent, and Riley finally spoke, voice less defiant but more uncertain. "Can we really do this? Together?" The echo of his lingering question transformed the moment, leaving Jake to grapple with the vastness of their undertaking. The stakes had never felt higher, and the path ahead began to reveal its winding complexities. But amidst that uncertainty, Jake sensed a pivotal shift. It was time to confront the ghosts of the past, not just for the sake of family, but for himself, too. This journey would test their resolve, but who they emerged as could redefine everything that lay ahead. As the first tentative steps emerged from their shared vulnerability, Jake's stomach churned with anticipation and fear. He had to face not only Greg, but also the shadows of his own choices. What had he been running from all these years? And could he rebuild what was lost, not just for Riley, but also within himself? With Riley's phone still buzzing ominously, the air thick with anticipation, the course was set for a confrontation neither of them wanted to accept. It was time to unearth the truth laid buried beneath their past as familiar faces approached once again. Jake's heart raced as he stood across from Riley, their conversation hanging heavy in the air, the weight of the choice laid out between them. He'd navigated through the tumult of their lives for years, often acting as both a shield and a sword in the battle against addiction, Riley's and, in many ways, his own. Now, the discordant rhythm of uncertainty pulsated around him, spurring his fight-or-flight instincts into overdrive. "Riley, I want you to know," Jake said, forcing his voice to remain steady, "that I believe you can overcome this. You can reclaim your life." Yet, as he spoke those words, an undeniable doubt crept in. Did he truly believe it? Did he have the tools to help his brother navigate the choppy waters of addiction and familial bonds? Riley's fingers danced nervously over his phone, a tether to the looming specter of Greg. The tension coiled tightly in Jake's chest. "Let's make a plan. Can you set up a time, a place for us to meet? We need to discuss how to put an end to this once and for all." "The more I think about it, the scarier it gets," Riley replied, releasing a breath that trembled with resignation. "I don't know if I'm ready to face him. What if he gets angry?" The flicker of fear in Riley's voice was heartbreaking, yet it ignited a stubborn determination in Jake. "Then we stand strong together," he reassured him, deciding to ground the moment. "Remind yourself that you're in control now, not him. You have power over your own decisions." Jake understood the burden of that power, how it could also weigh like a mountain. His thoughts turned to the sleepless nights spent questioning his own worth. He hoped Riley didn't feel the same existential dread. They shared a twisted fate, but also the capacity to chart a new course. "Let's do it differently this time," Jake said, a plan forming in his mind. "We'll invite him to a public place, make it less about confrontation and more about negotiation. I'll be there right at your side." Riley hesitated again, the tremor in his demeanor dampening any flicker of determination Jake had ignited. "What if he tries to manipulate me again? I'm not strong enough to fight him off." "That's why I'm here," Jake insisted, an anxiety creeping in. "I won't let him take you away from me again. You are not alone in this anymore." Riley looked down, chewing on the inside of his cheek. Jake's heart sank at the familiar walls constructing themselves around his brother, a fortress of vulnerability built from years of trauma. Before they could either retreat into emotional silence, Riley's phone buzzed once more, the screen glowing ominously. "Pick it up, Riley," Jake urged, seeking to disrupt the cycle that Greg represented. "You have a chance to say no, and that's a powerful thing." After what felt like an eternity, Riley raised his phone slowly, finally allowing the message to draw his attention. Jake's heart reached a fever pitch. Would Greg's words sway Riley, or could the moment crystallize their resolve? Riley's thumb hesitated. Then he read aloud, "Just meet me. You know you can't resist. It's not complicated." The casual bravado in Greg's text sent Jake spiraling into anger, the sentiment almost suffocating. It was the same game Greg had played before, manipulating vulnerability to reclaim authority. "Fuck that," Jake spat, the edge of his voice raw. "You don't owe him anything. You're free to choose your own path." But as the tension surged through the room, Riley's expression shifted, confusion swirling in his eyes. "Maybe he has a point," he muttered quietly, the familiar dance of doubt beginning anew. Jake exhaled sharply. This was the moment that could define everything. The tides of this unresolved past threatened to drown them both. "No, Riley," Jake burst, his voice surging with emotion. "This is not your reality. He doesn't dictate your worth. You do." A palpable silence enveloped them. Jake could almost see the riptide pulling at Riley, a choice made or broken in the flicker of a heartbeat. He had been so consumed with rescuing Riley that he hadn't stopped to think about his own journey, his own fears of regression. What if he faltered too? Would everything unravel in the crossfire? A muted realization hit him. Jake had to reclaim his own strength if he wished to guide Riley through the labyrinth of recovery. "Let's focus on us first," Jake suggested softly, sensing the delicate balance hung in the air. "We can confront Greg together, but first, let's focus on keeping today clear of his influence. How about we get some coffee now, just you and me? We'll write down our goals, or maybe create a plan to cope." Riley's shoulders shifted, and for the first time, a hint of clarity washed over his features. "That might work," he admitted, a flicker of trust igniting the fragility of their connection. A gnawing anxiety remained, however, festering at the back of Jake's mind. They were taking steps, yes, but how long would this newfound determination hold under scrutiny? Would the shadows of their past emerge to sabotage their progress? As they stepped out of the cramped apartment, a stark realization lingered over Jake. This was only the beginning. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Their inner battles still waged against the ghosts of regret. How far could they push against the currents of despair? Outside, the world buzzed around them, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within. Jake gripped Riley's shoulder, knowing that the next confrontation with Greg could draw dark memories yet again, and the battle for both their souls was far from over. What if they surfaced scars yet unheard, held secrets waiting to unravel from the past? As each step echoed along the pavement, Jake couldn't help but wonder what the confrontation with Greg would unearth next. The coffee shop buzzed with activity as Jake and Riley stepped inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixing with the tension lingering between them. Jake chose a quiet corner, away from the chaos that threatened to overwhelm them. As they settled at the table, Jake felt the weight of his own expectations pressing down. He had to remain steadfast for Riley, even if he felt unsteady himself. "Okay, let's start with some ground rules for confronting Greg," Jake said, flipping open a notebook he'd packed in his bag. He felt an urgency to lay down a structured approach, believing that clarity could help anchor both of them against the storm approaching. "What's your biggest fear going into this meeting?" Riley took a deep breath, the straining voice of his inner critic swirling back into the forefront. "I'm scared he'll twist my words, make me doubt myself, like always. I don't want to feel weak, or—" His voice trailed off, the fear creeping back into his features. Jake's heart sank at the familiar shadows of Riley's self-doubt. "No more second-guessing," he insisted, a fire igniting in his belly. "This time, we prepare. Write down what you want to say and what you want to achieve from the meeting. We need a mission statement. This is about you finding your voice." As Riley picked up the pen, his hand trembled, a reflection of his uncertainty and resistance. With each written word, Jake could sense that if they unwrapped the layers of Riley's past, they could chip away at Greg's overwhelming grip. It became a delicate balancing act. As Riley confronted his own inadequacies, Jake wrestled with his own fears of regression. "Here's the thing," Jake said, leaning closer. "You need to trust your instincts. If Greg tries to manipulate you, remember that you're prepared this time. You have me. You're not alone, and I won't let him win." Those words hung in the air, holding a profound truth. It struck Jake that he had been so focused on Riley's recovery that he neglected his own need for strength. His own past, shadowed by Greg's influence, loomed just as large. He had a history filled with temptations and poor decisions that haunted him. How could he guide Riley if he still battled those lingering demons himself? Riley finally started writing. The pen scratched across the paper, each stroke a small act of rebellion against the years of oppression he faced from Greg. Watching his brother take this step ignited something in Jake, a hope that they might break the chain of generational trauma together. Yet he saw the fragility beneath the determination. Riley was barely keeping the walls from collapsing. "Look at you," Jake said softly, wanting to remind Riley of the strength buried within him. "You're finding clarity. This is progress." Riley paused, looking up from the page. "What if it's not enough, Jake? What if I can't stand up to him?" "But what if you can?" Jake countered, allowing determination to seep into his own voice. "You are stronger than you know. You've been in the trenches. This is your chance to fight back." Riley bit his lip, uncertainty and nervousness mingling in his gaze. Jake's heart raced. The stakes felt higher than ever. Yet beneath the growing anxiety, he could sense a flicker of determination igniting within his brother, an ember that might become a flame in the right moment. As they finished their coffee, Jake formulated a plan in his mind for their upcoming confrontation. This wasn't just about Riley. They both needed to face the past, confront their fears, and ultimately reclaim their identities. Perhaps in unearthing their common battle, they could stitch back together the scars that had worn them down for years. Jake stood, ready to leave, and turned to Riley with fierce intensity. "This is our journey now. You're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for a future." Riley took a deep breath, allowing the words to settle into him. A flicker of courage passed over his face, a sign that they might just be on the precipice of something life-altering. Yet, as they left the coffee shop, the nagging worry returned. What unexpected connections might Greg have made during his silence? As they neared the car, Jake's mind raced with uncertainties about the incoming confrontation, a realization dawning that not only could Riley uncover his strength, but perhaps Jake could also confront the shadows of his own past that had thrived in the darkest corners of his mind. The air outside felt electric, charged with possibility and lingering dread of what awaited them. The moment of truth loomed ahead, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of unearthing truths they had avoided for far too long. What painful revelations would surface when they faced Greg? The answer felt ominously close, ready to unravel the facade they both had hidden behind for years. The car ride felt like a tense prelude to an opera, every turn and bump amplifying the suppressed apprehension in Jake's chest. He glanced at Riley, who was quietly staring out the window, the fleeting landscapes mirroring the internal chaos in his mind. Jake's grip tightened on the steering wheel, the rubbery scent of the dashboard mingling with the rising anxiety between them. This wasn't merely about Riley confronting Greg. It was about both of them reckoning with their past. "Riley," Jake said, breaking the silence like a drumbeat, "you're stronger than you think. Just remember all this prep we put into this. You finally started to identify what you want to say." Riley turned slowly, his eyes revealing a mix of vulnerability and a burgeoning resolve. "I know, but what if it all falls apart? What if Greg gets into my head again?" Jake could feel a sharp pain slice through him at the thought of Greg's potential influence. Then we adapt and we fight back. Just remember what we talked about. If he pushes, you push back harder. You owe it to yourself to not let him define who you are. They arrived outside Greg's office building, a cold, imposing structure that felt like a mausoleum of their shared history. The air was thick, as if infused with the weight of their past missteps and silent grievances. Stepping out of the car felt monumental, almost like crossing the threshold into a different dimension. The moment stretched, and for a heartbeat, Jake considered what awaited them. A volley of harsh words woven from years of manipulation, or a resurgence of hidden strength. "Are you ready?" Jake asked, his voice pulled taut by anticipation. Riley nodded slowly, and just as Jake was about to urge him forward, Riley hesitated. "What if I don't have the words?" His voice broke, an unmistakable tremor lacing his articulation. "Have faith in yourself," Jake encouraged, feeling a twinge of the same doubt echoing in his own self. "You do have the words. They've been waiting for you to put them to paper." A jolt of determination surged through his spine. They were in this together, and he had to cultivate not only Riley's courage, but find his own footing amidst the turmoil of confronting Greg. As they ascended the building steps, Jake felt the familiar tug of his past, shadows whispering of failures and missed opportunities. The thought of his own shaky foundation made him falter, but he shook it off. No way would he let his own insecurities weigh down Riley's pursuit for liberation. Inside, the sterile atmosphere was suffocating, the scent of polished flooring mingling with apprehension. Jake's heart thundered as they were called into the conference room. The moment felt surreal. The world outside seemed to fade, leaving just the three of them in this small, suffocating space. Greg sat at the head of the table, an air of calculated authority wrapped around him like a cloak. The sight ignited a simmering anger in Jake, a reminder of every careless quip and belittling remark he'd ever directed toward Riley. He clenched his fists, reminding himself that this was Riley's moment. They both needed to enter this confrontation armed with clarity and courage. As the conversation began, Jake felt himself retreating into the background, instinctively taking on a protector role. Yet a part of him battled for relevance. If Riley was going to reclaim his power, so would he. He needed to confront Greg, not just to defend his brother, but to reclaim pieces of himself fractured by years of intimidation. With every passing second, he wrestled with staying silent while the verbal exchange intensified. There, with the familiar tone of Greg's voice, Jake felt a small revolution igniting within him. It was time he stood his ground, not just for Riley, but for himself too. "Enough," he said, interrupting. The words slipped from him, but there was an unexpected calm in his voice. Riley glanced at him, uncertainty flickering on his face, but Jake felt an undeniable shift within. This isn't just about Riley anymore. This stops now. The air grew still, tension spiraling in the room. The surprise in Greg's eyes mirrored the awakening spark igniting within Jake, the rediscovery of his own agency. Nothing would stand in their way anymore. Yet with that movement of courage, a question echoed unsettlingly in Jake's mind. What implications would their stand have on their relationship moving forward? Could they both emerge unscathed from the emotional battle ahead? With this newfound clarity, the real struggle was just beginning. Jake's declaration hung in the air like a thundercloud, charged with pent-up tension. He had interrupted the familiar cadence of Greg's superiority with an assertiveness he never knew existed within him. Heart pounding, he glanced at Riley, who was still processing his brother's unexpected interjection. "Jake," Riley murmured, uncertainty splintering through his expression. Jake could feel the intensity of the moment vibrating around them. It felt both exhilarating and terrifying, an empowerment waiting to blossom, but fragile enough to shatter under scrutiny. Greg leaned back in his chair, a sharp smile glimmering on his lips that felt predatory, as if he reveled in this sudden turmoil. "Is that right? You two think you can take on a career spent crafting clever words with nothing but emotional outbursts? This is still my domain." That dismissive tone fueled a fire in Jake, but he dampened the flames instinctively. He needed to redirect energy into constructive dialogue, not reactive hostility. Riley's struggle had always stemmed from Greg's weathered authority, and Jake realized his challenge lay in re-establishing the ground rules of this dynamic, not only against Greg, but within himself. "There's more to this discussion than that," Jake replied, his voice steadying with each syllable. "Riley is here to articulate his truth. You may think you're in control, Greg, but you don't get to define our narrative anymore." The words dripped with a conviction that surprised even him. "A heartfelt speech doesn't hold weight in professionalism, Jake," Greg shot back, his eyes glinting with condescension. "What do you think this will achieve? Flattering fatherhood fantasies?" The word father stabbed sharply, a reminder of Jake's own shortcomings and unhealed wounds regarding his past failures. But the realization sparked something deeper. He wasn't merely fighting for Riley, he was fighting for a narrative where he wasn't overshadowed. Each moment spent sidestepping his own dual resentment toward Greg merged with the urgency to liberate Riley from this oppressive grasp. "I'm not here for accolades," Jake fired back, the heat of his anger flickering into a newfound strength. "I want you to understand that your time is over. Riley's been held hostage long enough, and I won't let you play puppet master any longer. It's not about what you want. This is about what he needs." The rapid beat of his heart echoed in his ears as he finished, realizing the magnitude of his words. In that moment, Jake stepped further into the light of his own emerging strength. Riley's eyes brightened, sensing his brother's resolve weaving courage into a stronger tether between them. Greg's expression hardened, yet Jake noted a flicker of doubt. This man, so accustomed to dominance, was finally confronted, and perhaps it rattled him more than any body of work ever could. Riley cleared his throat, his voice trembling with burgeoning confidence. "Jake's right. I've been afraid of you for too long. You don't have the power over me that I once let you have." For the first time, it seemed, Greg's assured air wavered. As the verbal volley continued, Jake sensed a shift within himself. Failure didn't have to be his identity. It could just be a chapter. The emotional upheaval around them became a crucible for personal growth, shaping how he viewed himself in relation to conflict, an unexpected metamorphosis igniting within him. Their confrontation progressed. The dialogue, initially laced with animosity, began to find points of clarity. With every revelation, Jake felt them both stepping more firmly into their truths. Here, in this stifling room, under the piercing gaze of their tormentor, Jake was crafting an unfamiliar paradigm, the wisdom of vulnerability as strength rather than weakness.
Yet somewhere deep within, an unsettling thought churned. Would being bold enough to assert their boundaries unravel other impending challenges waiting to redefine their relationship once they emerged from this battlefield? The deeper emotional ramifications loomed, urging Jake to question the impact on his own identity. Together we can redefine ourselves, Jake mused to himself, sensing the moment shifting yet very much on the brink of full resolution. As he caught Riley's gaze, a new question forged in his mind, one that demanded exploration. What if standing up for ourselves was only the beginning? Before they could fully digest each other's transformative potential, Jake knew they were no longer just confronting Greg. They were on the precipice of reinventing their very selves. The storm inside him mirrored the thunder outside. The battle ahead would test their resolve in ways they could scarcely imagine, both collectively and individually. With expectation crackling in the air, the unexpected turns of the confrontation lingered, leaving both brothers cognizant that change, once initiated, rarely came without sacrifice, and they would soon learn what price they would have to pay to reclaim their lives. The tension pressed against Jake's chest like a heavy weight, growing more palpable with every heartbeat. As Greg settled back in his chair, adjusting his tie, the dim fluorescent lights overhead flickered, rendering the atmosphere even more oppressive. Jake felt adrift in this hostile territory, a sense of disorientation mingling with determination. Riley remained beside him, the quiet strength radiating from his brother, providing an anchor in this turbulent sea. "Let's talk about reality, Jake," Greg taunted, his playful sneer revealing a dark excitement. "Words matter, but actions speak louder. What will you do when your little speech doesn't change the facts? You think you can just declare independence and everything will magically right itself?" Jake swallowed hard, a momentary doubt worming its way into his mind. Could it really be that simple? But beneath the fear lay something far more substantial, an evolving sense of resolution. What's about to change, Greg, is the way we tolerate your authority. It's time to reclaim our narrative, and that starts now.
The determination etched into Jake's voice was no longer just for the benefit of the moment. It was a promise he began crafting for himself, a silent vow to be more than the bystander. With each word that escaped him, he fought against the remnants of disempowerment that had held him captive for far too long. They were steeped in a lingering fear of failure, yet here he stood, daring to reshape the course of his life while offering Riley the same opportunity. Greg surged forward, suddenly animated, his brow furrowed deep with irritation. "You really believe you can change your situation? Look at yourselves. Where has your bravado gotten you? You're nowhere without my guidance." The intensity pulsated as Jake squared his shoulders, an instinctive self-revelation igniting inside him. "My worth isn't dictated by your opinion." With that, Jake began to carve out new ground, not just in this confrontation, but also within his identity. He felt the pulsate of purpose expand alongside his fear, a complex duality that fueled his defiance. At that moment, Riley shifted slightly closer to Jake. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond solidifying in this charged atmosphere. Together, they were pushing back against the ingrained expectations that tethered them down. Riley's own courage began to unfurl, inching toward the same freedom Jake was desperately seeking. "Greg, we're done being afraid," Riley stated, his voice trembling but resolute. "You've twisted our fears into something we accepted, no more." Jake's heart raced at his brother's words, a hope sparking anew in their shared gesture of strength. Yet beneath this flame lay coal, unforgiving remnants of doubt. Was it possible to confront the past and not just survive, but thrive? Greg's reaction was one of incredulity, a contemptuous laugh escaping him. "You too, brave souls ready to battle the Titan? You have no idea what you're up against. You may have just lit a fuse." That provocative statement lodged itself in Jake's mind. Igniting resistance was one thing, but choosing to challenge Greg meant acknowledging the deeper shadows that had lurked behind every decision he avoided. To stand boldly now meant addressing all the unsteady ground Jake had traversed alone for so long. As the confrontation continued to escalate, the resolve surged within Jake, realizing that confronting Greg was only part of the battle. They weren't just reclaiming their narrative, they were simultaneously battling the internal narratives that had long aged in the darkness of self-doubt and inadequacy. The quiet voice of lost expectations whispered ceaselessly in the back of his thoughts. What if you fail again? What if you disappoint him? Yet another voice was rising now, the one that insisted Jake had the right not just to change the trajectory of their lives, but also to redefine who he was in this harsh world.
With each exchanged barb, each growing assertion of identity, Jake felt himself carving a pathway toward growth. The confrontation would peel back the layers of shame he had carried for years, exposing the vulnerabilities buried deep within. Jake realized the battle against Greg was about shedding those old limitations and stepping into the unearthed strength he hadn't acknowledged until now. "Riley and I are stronger together," Jake finally declared, channeling both his fears and his hopes into that singular truth. "You can't hold us down any longer." The words seemed to hang between them, crystallizing his new focus. But even as the power dynamic began to shift, Jake felt the wall of fear still looming in the shadows of his mind. The ultimate test lay ahead. As their voices rose over each other in a maelstrom of emotional fervor, Jake understood that the road forward would not be easy. But courage was no longer a mere fleeting sentiment. It was an evolving promise, both for himself and Riley. Unbeknownst to them, the real transformation was about to begin, testing their very foundations. How could they prepare for confrontation with themselves after every wall had been shattered? What truths would they unearth in the aftermath of their rebellious stand? The confrontation continued to escalate in the cramped room, each word exchanged weaving a complex tapestry of defiance and resolve. Jake could feel the weight of years of silence shifting, an invisible bond between him and Riley growing stronger with each assertion of their newfound autonomy. Riley, bolstered by Jake's unexpected vigor, had uncovered a voice that long lay dormant. "Enough games, Greg," Riley stated, his voice flooding with confidence as he found his footing. "You may think you control everything, but I'm done being your pawn." This declaration hung in the air, a pivotal moment that defined a critical juncture in their tumultuous relationship. As tension thickened, Jake witnessed the transformation unfolding in real time. He understood that what they were confronting went beyond the immediate issues with Greg. It reached into the very depths of their identities. He had long been a bystander in his own life, shackled to the shadows of his past. But now a fierce determination to reclaim not just Riley's life, but his own, surged within. "Learn this," Jake said, his voice now holding a stronger resonance, standing firmly next to Riley as an unwavering ally. "You don't get to dictate the terms anymore. We're not here to listen to your empty words. We're here to finally stand our ground." Greg's demeanor flickered, a hint of uncertainty flashing in his eyes as he bristled against the pushback. He was losing control of the narrative, and in that moment Jake felt a rush of empowerment that had long been absent from his life. Yet, even amidst the rising momentum, Jake's heart raced with an acknowledgement of the precariousness of the moment.
He knew this confrontation was only one step in redefining themselves, an initial but monumental purge of the anxiety that had lingered for years. The true test awaited as they revealed their vulnerabilities and ingrained patterns, stripped bare before each other in the aftermath of this tense exchange. "Let me remind you," Greg pressed, his voice dripping with disdain, "you are nothing without my influence. You'll fail without me, just like you always have." Jake could almost feel the knife cutting through fresh wounds, but he stood resolute, grounding himself in that moment. "Failure is part of growth, Greg," he asserted, recalling the many times he had faltered after Lauren's death. "It's different this time. We rise from our setbacks, not fall victim to them." The sensation of shedding that old layer felt cathartic. While Jake could still hear echoes of self-doubt in Greg's accusations, another voice was speaking adamantly within him, urging him forward. He could now envision a richer existence, no longer constrained by other people's definitions. Riley turned to Jake, seeking reassurance amidst the storm. "What if he just makes the games worse?" he asked, hesitating at the precipice of fear that had long governed his existence. The weight of Riley's fears mirrored Jake's own uncertainties, but he responded firmly, "Then we face them together. You are stronger than you believe, and this manipulation ends today. Think about what you want from him. Let's turn the tables." Renewed conviction flowed through them as they faced Greg, whose facade was cracking under the pressure of their united front. The discomfort on his face was palpable, revealing the facade of control he had clung to for so long. As Jake's pulse steadied, he could feel the foundation shifting beneath him. This felt like a resurrection, both for him and Riley. His personal transformation didn't merely stem from this confrontation, but from a long-neglected introspection, one that began with admitting he too had his battle scars to reconcile. "Riley, what do you want to say to him?" Jake prompted, knowing this was Riley's time, an opportunity to finally speak his truth without fear of repercussions. "I want to be free," Riley answered, a flicker of light igniting behind his gaze. "I want to reclaim my life on my terms, without your toxicity shadowing me." The defiance fortifying their bond ignited something within Jake, the realization that moving forward was an act of courage unto itself. He felt a sense of pride swelling within him, crafted from years of struggle, affirming that they could overcome and reclaim their lives. In that moment, they were more than just brothers facing a common adversary. They were two men reclaiming the right to define their futures. In releasing the heavy burden of expectation, they resolved to reshape their identities independent from Greg's negativity. As Jake's pulse steadied, he could feel the foundation shifting beneath him. This felt like a resurrection, both for him and Riley. His personal transformation didn't merely stem from this confrontation, but from a long-neglected introspection, one that began with admitting he too had his battle scars to reconcile. "Riley, what do you want to say to him?" Jake prompted, knowing this was Riley's time, an opportunity to finally speak his truth without fear of repercussions. "I want to be free," Riley answered, a flicker of light igniting behind his gaze. "I want to reclaim my life on my terms, without your toxicity shadowing me." The defiance fortifying their bond ignited something within Jake, the realization that moving forward was an act of courage unto itself. He felt a sense of pride swelling within him, crafted from years of struggle, affirming that they could overcome and reclaim their lives. In that moment, they were more than just brothers facing a common adversary. They were two men reclaiming the right to define their futures.
In releasing the heavy burden of expectation, they resolved to reshape their identities independent from Greg's negativity.
With a deep breath, Jake prepared for the next steps in this critical confrontation, realizing that this was not just a chapter closed, but an entire volume of his life balanced on the brink of renewal. "Together, we can navigate this," Jake reassured Riley, placing a hand on his shoulder, drawing from that ethereal bond that had been fortified in adversity. "We're on the threshold of creating our own stories." With newfound clarity, both brothers understood that confronting Greg was merely the surface of an impending transformation that they would continue to unravel harmoniously, an evolution of identity, strength, and vulnerability tethered in the safety of embracing their shared journey. As the confrontation progressed, they didn't just reclaim their voices, they began to define their purpose. The demons might linger, but this was the moment they decided to emerge victorious against the odds, regardless of what scars still lay ahead in their paths of recovery. And as the winds of change began to swirl around them, Jake could see the horizon ahead, a promise of hope unfurling into the warm light of personal and professional growth, illustrating that true strength came from choosing to face one's fears and journey into the unknown. The real battle lay ahead, but Jake felt ready. The chapter set to redefine themselves was ripe for a new beginning. Would they continue unraveling their identities, ascending toward their own independence? Onward, he thought. Life awaited, filled with promise and the chance to finally soar. If you've connected with this story of personal overcoming and resilience, this is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help spread these transformative messages. Comment your reactions and theories about this conclusion. We need to hear from you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to uplift others with the power of personal growth.